Hey, where you been? Good to see you.
Mikey? Yeah. Well, good morning. This is the Facilities and Infrastructure Committee for December 14th, 2023. And let's get going. Changes to the agenda. We want to add to the agenda a resolution that's on your desk for airline contracts. We also discuss when we get to the green building issue. We have a resolution out of the Climate Advisory Board, Climate and Sustainability Advisory Board. Request for privilege of the floor. I'm not. Oh, I'm sorry. Thanks, Ann. I guess I wasn't using my mic. We do have a request for privilege of the floor from Martha Robertson, but we don't see her yet. If she comes in, we'll give her some time. Oh, she's joining now? Well, let's wait just a second then. There she is. We see her. Good morning, Martha. Martha Robertson is here for...
Hello, Mike.
Well, you're here for privilege of the floor. We're up to that. And I don't think I need to read you the rules. So if you'd like to speak to us, please.
Thank you, Mike. It's great to see everybody, and I really appreciate this opportunity. Martha Robertson from the town of Dryden, and a member of the Climate and Sustainable Energy Advisory Board. And we have discussed twice now as a board the draft green building policy in November and at our meeting last night, and passed the resolution. I think everybody should have on their desks, and all legislators should also have it in their email inboxes.
Yes, we have it. We have it. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mike?
I was just saying we do have it, yes.
Terrific. Just basically, we just want to thank Terry Carroll, the sustainability officer, and the rest of the staff that has put this policy together. We think it's very forward-looking. As you know, you can't turn on a news show or pick up a paper without reading about the hottest year on record climate disasters around the world. And this is something that Tompkins County can and should do. We deeply appreciate the detail that Terry's gone into in this policy. We like the idea that it will be reviewed every 2 years, because the technology and expertise of contractors and the workforce are really developing rapidly. So we feel it's very important that this be on a rapid review cycle of 2 years. So I just wanted to really highlight embodied carbon as one of the new issues that is in here that was not in the previous policy. That's very important. And you know, the board is enthusiastic about the work Terry's put into this and about the product, and hope that the legislature fully supports this policy. That's pretty much it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martha. We appreciate your coming in this morning on the Zoom. Any other privilege of the floor this morning? I don't have a formal report this morning. Let's go to county administration. Norma.
Thank you, Mike. So I just this morning, I wanted to give a quick update about the sale of the Red House, 408 North Tioga. The realtor is working diligently with the city of Ithaca to establish the designation, the historic designation for the building, hopefully prior to signing any kind of offers with the offers are timelined for for tomorrow at 3 o'clock. So all offers are supposed to be in for the building by tomorrow at 3. There's been more than 10 showings on the property. I think there's been some real interest in some multiple, the same person coming back multiple times. So there's been some real interest in the building. We've heard back from NYSEG about the pole and moving that. So that's, you know, the engineers have been out, they've taken a look at it. Nothing has been done yet, but at least that is progressing as well. And the next steps will be, once we have some offers in, we'll be looking at, you know, whether or not there's developing a subdivision and seeing if there's any kind of variances and such that need to be applied for. But that's where we are right now.
Lee?
Could you clarify, what's the designation from the city?
The historic designation, so there's a local, and Katie can probably fill in gaps where I miss it, but there's a local designation for, a historic designation for that area, but there's not a state and national designation, which is what the city is working on right now.
Is it being requested that that be added to it?
It is, yeah, so that they can, it's a matter of being able to apply for credits and funding related to historic preservation of a building.
Katie?
My understanding is that it's for the structure itself, not for the whole district, because the Red House was a contributing structure to the local district, but it had applications in the works apparently years ago to make it a historically designated structure so that it would qualify for all of these tax credits, to make it viable for a private investor to be able to get significant tax credits to upgrade the historic structure. So that's what's underway right now by the city staff, I believe.
So,
Thanks, Katie.
okay, so we're presuming that any offers that come in are going to want to take advantage of grants that are out there that would flow as a result of being a state or federal designation.
Correct.
Yes.
But the downside, it seems to me, on that is that if we don't get any offers, or if the offers are a small part, we've further encumbered that property for unloading it or doing something with it down the road. So we're taking a gamble that somebody's going to offer on this thing based on an ability to get grant funding that isn't right now eligible for it. Am I correct?
Yes, you need the federal designation to be able to get it. It's significant. It's something like 40% of the improvement costs are eligible for reimbursement. So it makes it so that a private offerer would have more incentive to want to purchase the property.
Okay, thanks.
Ann Corman?
Thanks for letting me chime in.
Absolutely.
So this may be for Katie, but if my understanding was this is something that was in progress. This wasn't something the county initiated, right?
I don't know the paper trail of it, but I don't think we approached them to further it. It was in progress years ago, got stalled, and I think through the activity of the Red House in the media, it got moved along further.
Right,
again.
that's my recollection.
One thing I've been thinking about, and I want to hope we're very careful about, and that is the county is not subject to the zoning and subdivision requirements of the city of Ithaca. And although we want to be a good have a good working relationship and try to work with them on that, we need to be very, very careful that we don't set a precedent here, because we've got other properties we're dealing with in the campus area. So I would want to be very, very clear that whatever we do, we're doing as a courtesy and not as a requirement. We ran into the same issues a couple of times with the town of Ithaca when we were doing the public works facility, or the highway facility, out in on Bostwick Road. And we want to work with them, and we went through the issues of site plan with them, but always with the understanding that we did not have, we're not looking to them for a permit. Only it was a courtesy. So I would be very careful here.
Another question, is it possible that any offers we receive on this property are going to be contingent upon having that additional designation?
They could be. Yeah, there could be requests that are contingent upon that as well. I mean, it's up to us whether or not we accept those contingencies, but yes. Just as well as any other contingency that could be added to the contract.
So from a process standpoint, is the city applying to designate this structure, or are we?
We are not.
Definitely are not. It's the city historic
city's.
preservationist, Brian McCracken, who would do that.
The Realtor is really just reaching out to see what the process in progress is of that. They've taken pictures of the property and such to submit. Because there's a lot of the old unique architecture that's still intact in that building, so it is of interest.
Understood, but what it means to me is that by the city doing this, they could be placing further restrictions upon us, which, to Mike's point, they may not necessarily apply to us, although I don't know if the state and federal designation trumps the county as far as our abilities to do something with it.
Deborah.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that, I'm not sure that state and federal designation would add that much more restriction to what our basic problem is, which is that even though we're the county and we can work around a lot of the zoning and permitting requirements that the city has, we can't work around the historic designation. So no matter who's designating it as historic, I don't know that that really hampers us much more than we already are. That's point number one. And then Mike's point, I understand that we accommodate or cooperate with the city when we're using our property because we don't have to necessarily comply with their zoning and permitting regulations, but I think it's different when we decide we're going to sell something to a private owner because they don't enjoy the same, exemption's not quite the right word, but they don't enjoy the same freedom that we do. And so I just think we need to be mindful of that.
Your point's taken, and when we sold the old library site, that's exactly what happened. The new owner had to
Right.
get the permitting process. And I have no problem with that in this situation, a new owner going through a permitting process with the city. But I'm just saying that I don't think that we as a county need to have the permit, although we can work with them.
Yeah, well, when it comes to setbacks and lot size and stuff like that, if we want to have a saleable property, we have to keep that in mind for the buyer, is all I'm concerned about.
Well, it just seems to me that it places further limitations in marketability on the property, and only a certain type of buyer is now consequently going to buy it, somebody that can restore it or do something, obtain grants related to the historical aspects of it. But
Don't
with
you think that was already the case, though?
with that additional designation, it really does limit who we're going to be able to sell the property to. And I don't know if we don't sell it, does it tie our hands as to what we can do with the site in the future? And I'm just saying that as an open-ended question. We're placing ourselves in a really tight place, or the city's placing us in a tight place. And I still have my difficulties with selling that land. But so be it.
Thanks, Lee.
Lee, I hear you, but I think the train has left the station on that by direction of the legislature. All right, thank you, Norma, for that update. Anything else you'd like to say to us?
I have no further updates. Thank you.
Let's go to planning and sustainability. Terry, we've got a policy here. We'd like to hear about it.
Yeah, let me bring up this PowerPoint here. All right, I think you can see it. Maybe the lights will dim. There we go. All right, so the Tompkins County Green Policy Update. I will say this has been a many month process. I think we even started it maybe last year, and it's gone through a lot of iterations, a lot of vetting, a lot of conversations with departments, with outside stakeholders. You know, Martha brought us bringing it to the advisory board as well. So I think a lot of thought went into this, and hopefully you'll like it. So why are we doing this? The original policy, green building policy, was developed in 2013. It was slightly modified in 2019, and really it's a little bit outdated. You know, things, as Martha alluded to earlier, shift pretty quickly in the green building realm. And we just felt like there was probably some enhancements that we could make that could really beef it up, especially when there is seemingly some new construction on the horizon, and wanting to make sure that we're building the best buildings that we can. We also wanted to better align with some of the county goals that have shifted in that time. So there's the energy roadmap, the energy strategy that the county is following, pursuing net zero, but there's also recycling and material management's rethinking waste plan. And actually, excuse me, let me pause there and say that Kat McCarthy from Recycling and Materials Management is with us on the Zoom as well. So if there are any questions on kind of the waste side of this, she's here to back me up, as well as Arel here to back me up on some of the other pieces. So really, we're trying to align with the county goals. So what is the current green building policy that we're operating under? So the criteria that the current policy applies to is that it's applied to any new construction, renovation, or expansion project that's over $500,000. And really what we're looking to do is trying to meet the equivalent of the LEED Silver requirements. So LEED is the Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. It's an international program that has gone through many different iterations and is updated somewhat frequently and constantly being iterated upon. LEED Silver is the second tier. It starts with bronze, then goes to silver, there's a gold, and there's a platinum tier. So since this policy was enacted, all buildings that we've been constructing, expanding, renovating have really been trying to aim for that LEED Silver tier, with exemptions that were possibly decided by the facilities department director. What we're doing in this new policy is some of it's staying the same, and then there's obviously some changes. And so what's staying the same? The applicable project criteria that I mentioned, so what it's going to apply to, new construction, renovation, expansion over $500,000, that's still the case. We're not changing that at all. Renovations, we're still targeting to go to LEED Silver standard. We're not changing that. There are still exemptions possible. We recognize that, you know, we're going to need to bail ourselves out in some situations, that we need to leave ourselves open in case of niche situations, and so we are still enabling exemptions in the policy to different pieces. But what's changed? And I'll go into each of these in a little bit more detail, but here's just a general list of some of the things. So we formalized a building project team. So this is something that's been done with a lot of the projects, but isn't written down in any of the specific policies. So we thought it would be good to formalize it. For expansion projects and new construction, we've changed from going towards LEED Silver to pursuing LEED Gold, with some specific points that we're looking for in there to ensure that we're building a building that meets our strategies. We're trying to take on embodied carbon, which I'll talk a little bit more about and define it later on. We're looking at waste reduction, so really trying to align with Recycling Materials Management's vision of the future and how do we approach waste, and especially construction waste. Looking at construction emissions, this is one of the more cutting edge items, and we tried to couch it a little bit. Again, I'll talk about that a little bit. And then finally, the fossil fuel restrictions. So jumping into it, this building project team idea is really something, as I said, that's been done with a lot of projects, but we're trying to formalize. And what we're trying to do is bring in administration, facilities, recycling materials management, planning and sustainability, other departments, third-party experts, whoever is necessary to really look at a project and start to act as an advisory, as a sounding board, to review project documents, provide recommendations to the county administrator so that they can then bring those recommendations to the legislature. So it's really meant to be kind of an internal team to help administration look at a project and provide that expertise that the different departments have. One member within this project team will serve as the sustainability lead. And what we saw here, and this is actually something that I've seen in some of the other policies nationwide that they're trying to do more and more, is have someone that really focuses on some of those sustainability measures, but also this is an enforcement mechanism. I think it's important with these policies that we ensure that they're being carried out and that there is somebody that's responsible for that. And that's what we see the sustainability lead doing, is making sure that the project is adhering to the policy that we're putting forth today, as well as giving somebody the task of looking at some of the specific things like what are the latest in LED lighting guidelines, what should we be doing with charging stations, bicycle spaces, so really giving that person actual responsibilities within this process. The next piece that's a big change is that
Terry, would you take questions on that now, or
Yeah, absolutely.
Want to wait till the end? My question is, will this team, how is this team different from what we're doing now? Will it add a layer of extra work for a building project that we didn't have before? Will it delay things? Thinking about, obviously, the big gorilla is the Center of Government project that we're about to start on. This team, aren't we already doing that?
Yeah, and in many ways we are already doing it. I think this is really an attempt to codify what we're doing as a best practice and ensuring that it continues forward. Just because it is happening now doesn't mean that it'll always happen, but I think that because it is happening and we've seen that there is value in it. We do have project meetings on the Green Facilities Project right now that go on, and in terms of the development of it, in terms of the ongoing efforts with it. And so it's something that we've seen is successful, and we wanted to, as I said, codify it and not just leave it as an unspoken practice. I think that's some of what we've done in a lot of the policies that I've worked on, is try and make sure that we're documenting what works so that future people that might take my role or Rel's role, anyone's role, will see it and say, oh, that's something we should continue doing. So how will this team work with the selected consultants, the architects or the engineers? Are they a part of the team? Does the team tell them what to do? Do they make advice to us? We're hopeful that they're going to be up to date on the green initiatives too. Yeah, Arel can absolutely jump in on this as well. I will just say from my experience with how we've done it with the green building capital plan or the green facilities capital plan, is we've had those meetings with Johnson Controls and have been working with them in the development and in the construction style. So we have seen the team that exists now work with Johnson Controls in this. So I think it would be a similar process. But Arel, I'd love, if you want to jump in and talk about that.
Yeah, so in the past when we've worked with consultants on previous building projects, we would let them know as part of the RFQ process, we would have it in the document that they would have to adhere to the county's, green building policy. Depending on when this gets approved, if it's today by the legislature, then afterwards, then we would include that in the RFQ that my department's working on for the Center of Government project. We also have a meeting prior to the start of a project. Actually, during the interview process, we would ask questions related to that. So we would share whatever policy is adopted or enforced at the time with the consultants, and then we would expect as we interview them that they would have some knowledge of what is expected. The last project that we did, which was major, where we followed, it was a major renovation, was the health department. Many of you were here at the time, and that was a LEED Silver, and we actually were seeking certification Here, we're only seeking that we follow the standard, not certification, because that adds into some cost. So that would be part of the vetting process with our consultants, but also as we meet with the consultants prior to starting design, we would make sure that they are aware of the policy, and then we may share some of the improvements that we've done in other buildings so that we could either follow the type of lighting fixtures that we have so that we could standardize certain bulbs and fixtures in any new building. So yeah, we would be involved. And so what Terry is saying, it would be, we've done it more informally now. It would be more formal. We report like to administration and to other departments, and it's really been our department and planning and sustainability involved at the table with our current consultants on, principally the green facilities project. So that's how we would formalize it. I mean, the only costs that would increase, and I don't think there would be significant, is now we're going to gold versus silver. And it's really a point structure, so depending on where you focus those points to achieve the gold, and I think this policy also does indicate where certain areas that we want to put a little more emphasis on. It's not all on HVAC. There are other areas where we can achieve those points. So, I mean, we've been involved, as Terry has indicated, in many, many discussions, and so we think this is a good policy to move forward at this time.
One more, if I may, and that is, how does this mesh with our airport projects, which they're FAA funded and state funded? Are we working with our airport engineers? We're going to build a fire station at some point up there.
Yeah.
How would this work with that?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, some of it gets dictated, and I'm glad the airport's here. I mean, some of it gets dictated according to the federal government standards. I think the federal government, the GSA, has actually moved to the promoting LEED Gold buildings as well. And so I think we're actually in pretty close alignment with them on that. So I assume that it would be, we would, be in lockstep. But if they say that the building has to be done a certain way, I don't think our policy can trump that. So we'll have to do what they say at that point.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we don't slow things down once we get started on a project.
Yeah, absolutely.
Randy.
Yes, thank you. I think the building project team's a good idea, so I'm glad you're formalizing that. Regarding to policy, I'm reading this. It's the legislature that establishes policy, correct? Is that the role of the legislature, is to establish policy? Was there a legislature involved in the rewriting of this policy at all? Or is it just administration and staff that have done that?
Maybe I'll turn to Nora. I mean, so legislators, so Annie was part of the case meetings and has seen some of this as it's been developed. The way we've created policies and the way that it's dictated in the policy on creating policies is that it's done by departments and then taken to department heads and then eventually taken to committee. And this is, I think, the opportunity for legislators to have input, but okay.
That is correct, yeah. That's the way it goes through a vetting process through
Yeah, this is our shot at it, Randy.
Yeah, I see that. And it's all red. So you've changed a lot of it, obviously. So so as I read that, responsive for preparing, reviewing project documents and providing recommendations to county administrator. So as the project team comes together and says, okay, this is what needs to be done, right? It's going to be presented to administration, not to the legislature, and then the administrator would report those to legislature.
Because that's implementation, which is not our job.
No, I'm just curious what policy is, right? So I'm just curious. Actually, implementation is our job as well, to make sure it's implemented based on all the stuff we gather, right? So we're going to make the final decisions on things, right? Like, we may decide that gold's too expensive, right, in this particular area? Or is that an administration issue, or is that a legislature? So I'm just curious how it works.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, go ahead, Katie.
I was just going to say, yeah, so this would go to the county administrator, then that person would make a recommendation to the committee, then the committee would give feedback on that recommendation, and then eventually it would go to the legislature, and yes, you have the final vote, the final decision on what would be done.
Thank you, that helps.
Okay.
Thanks for letting me get into that.
I see
Is there
Greg
another
has a
question?
question.
I didn't see it. Greg?
Randy, it also looked like there was opportunities for the team or the county administrator to make adjustments to some of the recommendations based on, I'm assuming, specific circumstances as it relates to a specific project, materials, availability, costs, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think what's the most likely scenario is the building project team will probably present a couple of options to the administrator, and then the administrator will select based on those options and take it to the legislature. I think that's very similar to what happens now already. I mean, that's what's happened with a lot of these projects is we've gone to Lisa and said, hey, we could do this way or we could do it that way, and then, it's really her call to then bring to you for ultimate approval.
Yeah, no, this looks great.
Where does it give that indication in the policy revision? Because it seems to me that if we don't stick to it, or if we're going to opt for silver rather than gold, then you're either violating your policy or you're under a certain...
Under the different areas, it does allow the administrator to grant exemptions in different pieces.
Yeah, like G1, second paragraph, where it talks about reducing embodied carbon.
Yeah.
The last sentence, this target can be modified by the county administrator in consultation with the building project team.
Yeah.
So I think it's specific. I can't pull out every time.
There's a few different times that it says that throughout there. We tried to make the language consistent.
Go ahead, Terry.
Sorry, I saw Norma with
Yeah,
her.
I just
sorry,
wanted.
Norma, I didn't see
No worries at all. So just to kind of reiterate that this is not outside, this is all part of what we already do with the project approval requests. So I believe this is not intended to replace what we currently do when we're talking about budgets and looking at projects and approving projects and costs and so on. I think probably what this is going to lead to, and that was not a pun, is having to edit the PAR form to accommodate these, so that when folks are entering their PAR forms, that they're addressing those requirements that are highlighted in this policy. That's the way I would see it moving forward. So next year, the PAR form might look slightly different because we'll have these additional fields that will have to be taken into consideration as folks are filling them out.
Okay. And yeah, as I said, there's more questions. We can definitely try and jump into them. The change that we were just talking about, the change to LEED Gold, Aurel mentioned we are not requiring the actual certification of LEED Gold because that costs additional funding, and there's definitely going to be, probably some projects where we want to have that recognition, and there's going to be other projects where it doesn't make sense to spend the money in order to actually be able to claim it's a LEED Gold building. So it's really just meeting the threshold, but not actually seeking the certification. And within LEED Gold, the way the LEED system works is that there's a whole mess of different actions that you can take that have different point values ascribed to them, and you're looking to get to different points values. And so if you hit a certain point threshold, you're bronze, then silver, then gold. And within each of those, there's also some prerequisites. And so with LEED Gold, we set out to target specific areas in order to make them align a little bit more with what our county goals are and to address some of the criticisms that we've heard from the community, especially with regards to the LEED system. So really the places that we're targeting are things like energy efficiency, enhanced commissioning and building management systems, which is something that we're already doing with the Metasys system, refrigerant management, which is an area of growing concern, bird-friendly buildings. This was actually directly from the presentation that was given to Peak and the feedback that I got from the legislators there saying that they wanted to see this included, and then lighting. And that's has to do with a little bit with that energy efficiency piece. And so within the policy, you'll see that each of these categories has, must achieve at least this many points in this specific action that's attributed to each of these specific things. Embodied carbon. So the idea of embodied carbon, it's sometimes referred to as upfront carbon. It relates to the carbon footprint of a material. So we measure this in what's called carbon dioxide equivalent, and we're basically looking at, okay, so if we're using concrete, it has a certain amount of embodied carbon in it from the creation of concrete. And so looking at the summation of a building, all of the materials that go into that, we can try and have an idea of how much basically carbon is being used to create a building. The reason that we're bringing this in is that increasingly what we see with buildings is that the amount of carbon that goes into creating a new building can sometimes vastly outweigh the actual lifetime usage of the building itself. You know, especially as we've made buildings more efficient, as we're moving to electrification, we're seeing that the actual process of building a new building can be the most carbon intensive of the entire, you know, operations of the building. So what we're trying to do with this is look at, okay, what if we were to create just a normal building, a code according to how code dictates it can be built right now, what would that number look like? And let's try and target a 5% reduction. As it states right there, and I think as Greg mentioned in the policy, this is a target that can be modified by the county administrator. So if we look at the baseline and we say, okay, it's this amount, reducing it by 5% would cost X amount of dollars, that's too much for this project, you know, but maybe 1% is palatable, maybe 2% is palatable, then that's something that the county administrator can absolutely do. And I'm sure that would end up being a conversation with the legislature as well. The other part of this is starting to prioritize environmental product declarations. So what these are, you can see an example on the right. They're, you know, colloquially called nutrition labels for building materials. So starting to really look at, okay, what materials have these that we can decide to use them because they're publishing that information. But in terms of embodied carbon and what can be done, you know, it's a lot of stuff around design, actually. You know, I think many people think of this as, okay, we need to use certain materials, but so much of this comes down to the design of the building itself. So are we using materials efficiently? You know, instead of using extra materials, can we reduce the amount of materials that are going into a building, using things like advanced framing or using different types of materials themselves? Are we designing for flexibility and reuse? And so this is something that CAT really brought in with recycling materials management, this idea that, you know, these are buildings that as government buildings go, and as this committee and other committees have had conversations about, you know, they have a long lifespan and they go through many different usages. And so can we prepare for those usages over the course of its lifetime by leaving spots to be more flexible or designing them so that if they do have to be shifted, open floor spaces that can be converted around, whatever it might be, that can help reduce embodied carbon. As I said, being more mindful of materials used. You know, we are a green purchasing community. We, in our environmentally preferred purchasing policy, we specify Green New York specifications, and following those. That's a New York State program that puts out specific specifications that municipalities should be looking for when they're buying products. There's one for concrete that we would probably look at when we're trying to source materials for this. And then there's the salvage and reuse of building materials. So are we able to reuse some of what we're salvaging from different sites as we're deconstructing them, presumably? Yali?
Did I read just recently that concrete and the production of it is one of the largest embodied carbon sources?
Yeah, the process itself uses not only a lot of heat, which often is produced by fossil fuels, but it's the actual process itself. I think it's like the calcifying of the limestone actually produces a lot of process emissions from it. But there's ways to decrease it by using things like coal ash, actually, and you can actually pump CO2 into the concrete itself and use that to sequester it. So, you know, part of it is, can you use better versions of concrete, and also can you use less of it? And that's where it comes back to that building design.
So in designing a center of government building, for example, we may be seeking to put out bid documents that do something out of the norm from what a traditional concrete and steel building might look like.
Yeah, I mean, it could be something like trying to follow those Green New York specifications that are outlined and saying, hey, this is the type of concrete that we want to use because we know it supports less, it reduces the amount of carbon emissions in concrete. Or it can be, talking to the architect and designer and saying, hey, is there a way to design this building so it uses less concrete than it normally would? Maybe it's changing the size of the footers or, looking at how the slab is created and the materials that go into it.
Randy?
Yes, so we're getting ready to knock down 4 buildings, so
Yeah.
does this apply to any of the, how are we tracking the data of those buildings and the deconstruction of them? I mean,
Yeah.
and the carbon and what's truly being recycled? For example, we just knocked down the dental building, and I know we salvaged a lot and put a lot of stuff in the ground to do that, but are we actually tracking any of that information?
We are not personally planning in sustainability, and I will say that this policy, in an early iteration of it, looked more at the end of building life and how to handle that, and it was deliberately taken out of this policy, and so we don't cover kind of what happens with deconstruction and salvage and end of life in this specific policy. It was a conversation in the Environmentally Preferred Purchasing Committee yesterday of whether that's something that group wants to look at this upcoming year as part of the work plan of whether it's a new policy or changing an existing policy to try and do more around that exact area. But this policy doesn't cover that.
Katie?
I would just add, I think part of the reason of creating this project team is to formally bring in recycling and materials management to have those discussions early on, because they would help prompt these ideas and tracking. And I believe Kat's on the call as well, if she wants to jump in on the dental building or any other plans.
Yeah, to my knowledge, that specific information on the metrics from diversion on that project were not provided to us at this time. But I think that's definitely an opportunity in looking at, how this policy is set up. And while it doesn't specifically speak to some of those components, I think that is a component where with the project team, there would be opportunity to kind of say, let's look at how much diversion is happening. Let's see if we can monitor that.
Yeah, my thought is that it provides opportunity for us to share with the public the right way to do things and how we're being good partners, and so.
I'm personally very interested to hear about this discussion on concrete, because I just a couple weeks ago heard a couple of companies talking about they're developing concrete instead of using limestone, which produces this carbon dioxide. It's a different stone, and the stone doesn't produce that carbon dioxide, and it's just as good as the concrete that's made with the limestone base. So I think that's something we can look at when in the future, with the center of government building or whatever.
Yeah, there's some interesting stuff. There's actually a startup that's in Binghamton out of the Kauffman incubator down there that's trying to do some stuff around concrete with glass aggregate that's along those same lines as well. So I think there's things that we can definitely explore. So waste reduction, so this is the consideration of preservation and best practices, including deconstruction. So looking at when we have a job site, I don't know how many of you have been to a typical job site, but oftentimes there'll be a giant dumpster and everything goes into that giant dumpster. I think what we're trying to do with this policy is to a certain extent try and move away from that and really prioritize, okay, as we're either deconstructing a building or as we're building a building, what can be salvaged and reused. So if we're cutting, as an example, 2x4s for framing a part of the building, what's happening to the offcuts? Can they be used in other pieces of the building, or are they going into that general waste dumpster to just go to a landfill? And really saying, hey, let's think about how the offcuts and everything else can be used within this. So prioritizing that on-site salvage and reuse in the construction process, recycling what can be done. Unfortunately, on construction sites, often what happens, something comes in cardboard boxes, that cardboard all goes into that same dumpster that's going to the landfill. But putting in a concerted effort and saying to the construction team, hey, we want to make sure that you're recycling this stuff. And so in the policy, it has the construction team creating a waste management plan and giving reports on what's being what's being salvaged, what's being recycled, and what's actually going to the landfill. So it includes that as the third tier in that. Yeah.
Sorry, I hate to keep belaboring
That's fine,
this
yeah.
in like each slide. Obviously, that's a culture shift for many trades and building sites and job sites. How do we manage, or what resource do we as the county have to put behind making sure, because you originally talked about the enforcement of a policy. To get the HVAC contractor to take the ductwork out of the box and then, flatten the box and put the box somewhere rather than just putting it down a chute and saying it's in the dumpster. How do we manage that? And maybe this is a question for Arel. How do we make sure that we're trying to culturally shift a trade or trades that have been doing the same thing for ever?
Go ahead, Arel.
We find them and then we throw them off the job. No, we
beat them.
I'd like to sometimes on the repeat offenders, but no, I mean, a good example is when we did the health department, which was a LEED Silver, we put it in the specifications. So you put it out to bid, but we have pre-bid meetings with those that are interested, and we really focus on those things that are either unique to our project or not really that traditional in other projects. And I remember at the health department we talked about that, because you're right. Most contractors just throw it in the same dumpster. So we had several dumpsters. They were all labeled, and so cardboard went in one, and metals and others. We recycled at the health department carpeting. So I mean, some things are tough and costly. In those days it was easier, but now it's hard to find for certain products who you send it to, because sometimes you have to send it out of state. So carpeting is one. We had vinyl composition tiles, ceiling tiles, things like that. And then when we have our biweekly meetings with the contractors, that is a line item regarding that. And so the lead contractor, usually the general work, would have to monitor that. They would have lists of what the amount of the different products that are being recycled, what has to be taken to the dump. And those are things to achieve, at least for the health department, for certification. We have to submit those. And so we have logs on a biweekly basis, and then we submit reports monthly. So that's fairly easy to do if you have it in the bid specifications. It's not if you bid it and then you say afterwards, hey, we're going to have to add it. Then you get hit with a change order. So it's not difficult to do as long as you include it in the specifications and you're monitoring it as you meet biweekly with the contractors. So I don't see a problem. I think more of the challenge is that certain products, if you are going to either recycle, reuse, it might be more costly. Like right now, we're looking at the photovoltaic panels at the library. And we can either send it to the dump, which we would save probably $30,000 by doing so. But if we want to recycle them, it's going to cost us $30,000. And so to do the right thing, we're going to have to spend extra money for that. So those are types of things in that project team that Terry was referring to, that we would look at those internally and see what might be cost prohibitive and what things it's going to cost a little money. And then we would bring those things either to administration and most likely to committee, to get the committee to weigh in on those things. Because, yeah, if I don't see that we would be able to do everything 100%. There are certain areas where we may have to either lower the percentage or make modifications. So it's not 100%, and so there is some discretion. But I think with this formal team, and we've done great so far on the Green Facilities Project with working with Terry and making adjustments.
Well, Earl, I like that explanation, except I'm looking at the policy as we go along here, and reference to new building projects specifically that impose a shall on us, and later on with substantial renovations or expansions of unoccupied buildings, that seems to give you the silver flexibility. But as far as I can see here with new building projects, we're tying ourselves to a gold standard. Is that correct?
Yes.
So are you still going to do a cost-benefit analysis and come back on those projects to us, or are we going to lock ourselves into building a new building to the gold standard?
I think there's an exemption. I mistakenly didn't bring the policy with me here, but I can take a look. But I believe that there is an exemption within the policy that allows us to downgrade a new construction if we need to.
Deb?
Also, isn't it the case that because these lead levels are point-based, you can decide you're going to invest most of your points in one particular area and perhaps then not meet another area's standards. So I think that gives us a lot of flexibility as well.
Is that something we would expect to see when you bring a design forward to the building committee? And tell us what the options have been and where the savings or added expenses may be?
Typically, we would work with our designers and then include the project team. If there's an area where we think it's going to be a challenge to meet it, either for cost, and we may have another option where we may have to focus getting additional points in a different category, I think that would probably be something we'd bring to committee. But if we feel we could meet the gold, I think we could probably tell you what we're doing as far as the actual project, where the focus, either HVAC, energy efficiency, all the other categories that Terry had mentioned. I know that on the green facilities project, for the subsequent phases, we have had discussions where we cannot meet, like geothermal, certain buildings. We just don't have the space to do a well field. And so that might be a limitation on a new project, like for the center of government. That's why there's been discussions about district geothermal, because we may not have enough room in the parking lot to do geothermal for this complex. So then our shift may be in other areas to accomplish those points. But I see those as things that we would bring to committee as we're developing the project. And early on in the schematic phase, we would, working together with the team, indicate these are the areas, this is our policy, and these are the areas where we want to focus getting our points, and then see as the development project goes with our MEP, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineers, to see where we're going to get. And then we would have some cost numbers. And I think that's where we would have to say, well, yeah, this is something that's within our budget. If not, then we have to look at different alternatives, which is what we've been doing with the green facilities project to date.
So, Lee, I just took a quick look. I will say this is the 7th iteration of it, and I know it was in earlier iterations of it. It was the intention to carry it over to allow the administrator to make a change if necessary, so it's not in this current version. It's very easy to add in a line into the policy that says that it could change at the county if the county administrator deems it necessary. Because I hear what you're saying, that right now we do lock ourselves into only going for gold in new buildings, and I think for a lot of buildings it makes sense, but there may be a building down the line where it doesn't, where it might make sense to go for silver or even maybe platinum. So I can add that line.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate Arel's answer here just immediately before that.
Are we all in agreement with adding that?
I don't have a problem with it.
I think that would be a good idea, Terry.
Yeah.
Can I just interject?
I'm just going through a project in another municipality, and to Arel's point, there was a limitation imposed on us just by the physical aspects of the site that ruled out using geothermal. But there was a second part to that conversation that had a roughly 5% cost increase to the project had we been able to do that. And that's where my concern is that we still leave ourselves the flexibility moving forward, that if it's just cost prohibitive, that we don't tie ourselves to this policy that's going to add significantly to the cost of a project.
I'll get you, Randy, I'll get you, Ann, but I wanted to say this. We're almost an hour into this. This is a fascinating discussion. I think we're having fun with it, and it's so important. But I really would sort of like Terry to be able to finish up, because we've got other departments we've got to work on, and maybe we could hold the questions after the people who've been recognized until he gets to the end of the. So Randy, Ann?
I can wait.
Okay. Go ahead, Terry.
All right. Zero emissions construction site, as I said, this is something that's kind of, trying to push the envelope a little bit. An example of a zero emissions excavator there on the side. For this one, it's really just about promoting, asking, in an RFQ and RFP if this is something that they're considering. There's no mandates in the policy saying it has to be a zero construction work site, but just putting the question out there and seeing if that's something that can be done or if they can try and encourage that where possible. Moving to electrification, this is something that we're doing with a lot of our buildings, but really taking out fossil fuel-based equipment except for the circumstances of backup power generation. So heating, cooling, domestic hot water, ventilation, what limited cooking we do in county operations, that'll all be electrified. So the eternal question, how much is this going to cost? And this is not only an eternal question for municipalities, but something that's been looked at with LEED for, since its inception. So you can see the earliest study in 2023, and then going out through the years. And, it's a lot of text on there to basically say, it depends. So, you can see that sometimes they've seen no cost difference, sometimes they've seen minimal cost difference, sometimes it can go up as high as 10%, 6 to 25 year building paybacks. So it really runs the gamut. And part of that is because there are some potential cost adders. Some of it's soft costs if you're doing energy modeling, commissioning that you might not have done before. Materials and equipments, if you're buying different materials, if you're using different equipment, that has the potential to add cost. Waste reduction strategies, if you're trying to ask contractors to do something that they're unfamiliar with, and that might add time, that could also add expense. But there are some things that help diffuse the cost as well. As I said before, LEED is an international program, but here in New York State, we do have a pretty strong building code, and especially the energy side of it. And so a lot of what's in our New York State energy code already meets a lot of the elements of LEED. So these are things that we would be doing anyways that wouldn't necessarily increase the cost because we're forced to do them through the code. The Inflation Reduction Act has a lot of incentives around equipment costs and energy modeling. And so you see that soft cost energy modeling. Well, there's an Inflation Reduction Act incentive to help support that as well, that can help reduce that cost. And similarly for solar panels, for geothermal, for EV charging infrastructure, there are incentives to go along with that. There's also the fact that, if you are pursuing LEED Gold, for instance, or pursuing some of these higher levels of sustainability and trying to push the envelope, it does open the door for a lot more grant opportunities that you might not otherwise get when you're pursuing a more standard building. And then there's the payback piece of it. So, by building a more efficient building, by investing in weatherization, insulation, air sealing, building management, commissioning, these are things that'll pay off in the long run and over time. And then finally, this idea that smart design can really mitigate cost increases. So I think there's a lot of times this fixation on, well, we're going to have to use, these different materials or this different equipment. And I think a lot of that can be alleviated by trying to do some really smart design principles. And hearing conversations between this committee and the Downtown Facilities Committee, I don't think there's any desire to build, what we see on Route 13 from Cayuga Medical Center with a giant glass building. But it is the fact that when you build these giant glass buildings, those are harder buildings to get to LEED Gold and LEED Platinum because you are building things that are just in their nature less efficient. A glass window is going to be less efficient than a wall. And so things like smart design by saying, hey, we are going to not use as many glass windows. We're going to use windows that have higher R values but are, casement windows versus, double, whatever it might be. I mean, those are design principles that you can install that mitigate the cost but don't necessarily have an impact on the materials side of things. So some key takeaways in this, because I know we've gone over a lot, the new construction expansions are targeting LEED Gold. We're formalizing that building process project team. We're trying to broaden some concept of green building, so looking at embodied carbon, looking at waste reduction strategies. But then finally that, really costs can be mitigated by that good planning and design. So, getting an architect, a design firm, an engineering firm that you trust and say, hey, we want to do this in a cost-effective way. We have these goals. These are the targets. But let's not just try and sink all the money into fancy equipment and things. Let's really be smart about this and think about how we're designing the building from the ground up and starting from that initial, planning stage and through the construction phase. So I think there's probably some questions. So,
Randy, go ahead, or Ann?
Thank you. Some of my questions were kind of answered by what Terry just said. I just want to say briefly, I know you're going over time, that just in reference to the case board resolution in support of this policy, I want to appreciate Terry for sitting down with some of the experts from that advisory board and thank the advisory board, which we have a lot of regional experts on environmental topics and building experts. So I want to thank them for carefully reviewing the policy and you giving them time to look at that. And so their resolution is actually not recommending any changes, which is because you were responsive to them. And so I appreciate that. And so the resolution is just in support of adopting it. So that's all I wanted to say. And also, along with the case board, they thank Terry and our whole planning department for all and the county for all the work that we have done and being leaders in it. And they talked about that it really makes a difference in the community. And if anything else they recommended was to really make sure that we do more work on touting what we're doing. One idea I had was maybe having grand openings when we do renovations or geothermal, to the wider community, because we are leaders and we will inspire more industry, governments, and developers to do more of what we're doing, because it is possible. So thank you.
Thank you, Ann, and you're absolutely right to thank the advisory board. That's why we have advisory boards and why we pay attention to them, and they are good people. Anything else? Go ahead. I think Randy was next, then Greg.
So I just want to summarize. So currently, our building policy is that we will build it to silver.
Yeah.
That's the policy as it is today.
Yeah.
And so this is proposed to not adamantly we have to be a gold, but we're going to try to achieve gold. Or are we saying we're building a gold? So I'm just going to make sure I understand.
So for expansions and new construction, when I do the rewrite that we were talking about, the default target will be to go towards the gold standard. It will allow the county administrator, upon recommendation, in consultation, to downgrade if necessary.
That decision would be shared with the legislature, and we may have to vote on that.
Yeah.
It's going to cost an extra $400,000 to go to gold, and we'll have that choice at that time, right? Or just, it may not, but I'm just trying to understand that. So I'd really like to understand the language that we're going to put in this.
Okay.
So, okay. Thank you.
Greg.
I think the plan would be, some of the language that you see in some of where the exemption is for other places, to kind of cut and paste that language for the gold piece and say, this can be changed upon, by the county administrator upon consultation with the building project team, just to maintain the consistency of the document.
And this would go to GO next, so that change would be incorporated in that policy. So that could be shared with everybody here before it goes to GO, so you could weigh in that way as well.
Greg?
Yeah, I'll keep it quick. This is great work. I think it really comes down to just education, right? Educating legislators, educating the public, educating our contractors and our facilities folks and everybody around that, and then also trying to spur and inspire creativity. And I think a policy that does that is a good policy. So that's why I'm fully behind this. Mike, do we need someone to move the resolution?
I was just going to ask you. You want to move it?
I'd be happy to move the resolution.
Can I get a second? Seconded by Deb.
So can I ask?
This is with the change that we talked about. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wanting to ask if it would be with that amendment.
Yep, I will make that change today. And I'll make that change today, and I'll make sure everyone gets a copy of it with that change.
So when it goes to GO, that'll have that in it, right?
Absolutely.
Anything further? Are we ready to vote? All those in favor? Are there any opposed? That's unanimous. Terry, nice presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Can you share your PowerPoint with the committee?
I think it was in the agenda.
Is it in?
Was it?
Not in the, is it?
I didn't see it, no.
It's not in the packet.
Okay. I have shared it, but I will share it again.
All right, thanks.
Thank you for your patience with our questions.
Yeah, no, of course. Happy to do it.
Let's go to our airport. We've got both Josh and Roxanne here this morning.
Morning. So we do have a bunch of resolutions on the agenda. But I just want to kind of give some background. It's kind of going to relate to the resolutions and also just some updates. So I'll go through some stuff. Josh is going to weigh in, and then, we can kind of go from there. So in relation to the ARF SRE building, we'll start right off with that. At the last F&I meeting, I reported that we'd received notice that we were receiving additional funding to help offset the cost for that, for the New York State Air 99 grant. That's a resolution that's on the agenda. We kind of pulled the ARF SRE off. As you all know, we pushed it back because of funding, because of the status of the airport and where we were at. We've re-looked at the project. Josh took a hard look at it. I'm going to move it to him on kind of where we're at. And the grant that that we did receive, that the resolution is for, can be pushed off up to 5 years, and then they will extend it after that if need be. But we've done a lot of homework. Josh especially has done a lot of homework to get the costs where it's more doable. So I'll let him speak on that.
Well, good morning. So Lisa and myself, Norma and Roxanne, we had a discussion about how we move forward with an FAA project that was put forward through an inspection a few years back. I did some driving around and pretty much coming on job sites of other municipalities that were building structures in the area, one in Lee's hometown, and the cost reduction of the type of structure that they're building, which would be 100% feasible for us to do, was about 50% of the price per square foot of what we had projected. So I went back to the consultants and said, well, we got to do some cutting, right? Like, we got to figure out why they're at a certain dollar amount per square foot and we're twice that. We looked at every avenue. We cut some square footage, how we initially were planning on building the building, and pretty much went back to the drawing board. We were at one time, we were looking at like $3.5 to $4 million out of the county, out of the airport budget to fund this FAA building. Through all the different pots of money, that's how much would come out of our budget. We have now cut it down to about $402,000. So that's a huge savings.
Could you say that figure again, please? Could you say the figure again, please?
Right now, projected, we're still working on cutting it, but it'd be about $402,000.
That's the portion. That's the portion.
Of the county money.
Not the total.
The county money, okay. Yeah, I was going to say.
Down from the county money previously?
Yep.
About $4 million.
About
$4 million. Are we still hiring for budget director?
But I do, is that
well,
the two grants, is that after those two grants?
That definitely helps, for sure. But we were still in the millions of dollars worth of county budget airport money. And really, it's getting away from the typical brick and mortar type building, right? The block, and looking at a pre-engineered building, which would still give us the lifetime, easy enough to replace stuff if we need to, similar to what Groton has done on their firehouse. Square footage wise, we have more equipment on the snow and snow removal vehicles than like the firehouse that Groton is building. But the square footage for their firehouse and our firehouse was pretty much the same, right, in their office buildings. So we just...
Deb's question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, and the FAA would be happy with this?
Yes. Yep. So we've had discussions with them. Again, the only thing the FAA requires is we meet New York State code. There's a few other things that they require. They do require the LEED standard, so they would accept this policy that was just brought forward. And of course, they're not going to be paying as much either, right? Because their total federal spend that they would be giving us on this new building is $17 million. So before they were $25 million, right? So to change the way that we're looking at things and how we were going to build it to make it more feasible, it really just needs to be in operation. We don't need a brick building to store a snowplow equipment. It just needs to be heated, right? So, I mean, it's going to last us longer than I'll be there. So I think looking at every avenue to keep the costs down, right? Make our operational needs from what the FAA says we need, we're in a better place.
So what would be the timeline, and is this in our budget?
So I can kind of speak on this quickly too. So this right now is not in the 2024 capital plan. We don't have a PAR form because again, CNS is still working. They're still trying to get more of this covered. They're trying to figure out the best option so we can keep bringing, the cost down as much as possible. So we're going to look at, so right now, FAA kind of has it in their capital plan for 25. So we're going to be, really working with CNS, with Norma and Lisa, appreciate all of their help and support in this and looking at things. I think I've probably redone a spreadsheet, I don't know how many times, with numbers, sent it off. Tom sends different stuff. Josh and I sit down. Great having a numbers person too as your deputy, let me say that. And we've recalculated, and of course, we have the portions of how we're going to fund this, with multiple different ways. We've plugged in numbers, and when we met with Norma and Lisa, we just walked in and Lisa was like, this is fantastic. This is great news. So, it took a lot and it took some effort, but we're there. So hopefully we'll have some more definitive numbers and we can, Josh had spoke to Tom and wanting to get this out to bid as soon as possible too, to see where the costs really come in. Because you don't know until you get a bid number in. But again, it's not going to affect the FAA portion. They're going to cover the 90% of the AIP eligible. That's where we run into the strange stuff because some of it's not. But hopefully maybe in 25. I can't state that for a fact, but as soon as we can and as soon as we can work the numbers, we're going to try to get it done.
And it's in the capital plan?
It's in the plan, but it's not part of the budget for 2024.
No.
Yeah.
I understand it's not next year.
It's been in the plan.
Okay.
Yeah, for a while.
So ultimately, with whatever the final project is, you're looking at a 90% funding from the federal government?
So, yes, on certain eligible parts, right? So if you break down the building, they might only cover 75% of the ARF bays, right, for where the fire trucks park. So we would have to pay, they would pay us 90% of that 75% that's covered. So there's some eligibility spot. So what we've been doing is trying to get, the FAA is very finicky on how they write their advisory circulars. So you try to get as much covered under their eligibility part and bring that eligibility up as close to that 100%. So then they'll cover that 90. So we're at like 78% of the ARF building is eligible. Okay, so then you have to add some things, because you need showers, and that might not be an eligible thing, or there's certain things that aren't eligible that we would have to cover by a different means of money. There's a whole breakdown. I can send it to you. It'll make your.
I guess where I'm headed to is the bottom line. What's the local share on the overall project that we're looking at? And it sounds like that number is shrinking too.
Yeah, and we think we can actually bring it down another 150 to maybe even 200,000. So we might be all in a couple $100,000 out of budget.
All in.
All in.
And that comes out of airport reserves too.
It would come out of, it comes out of the budget, but it gets reimbursed by PFCs.
No, so the PFCs is going to be a larger portion. So the PFCs is still in there, but we also might be able to reduce the PFC portion with funding from, so back when we sold the land to the DOT, those funds, part of those funds, 90% of those funds have to be used for an AIP project. So we can use, it's fun. So we can use those funding to cover a portion of what would be felt under the PFC portion. And then the other amount, the 300, 400, 5, whatever, 400,000, we'll say that is kind of where we're at right now, would be not PFC eligible and not AIP eligible. So that, there's another portion of the state funds that we can use as part of that. But also, so we would have to come up with a couple of $100,000 from our fund balance, from our operating of something of that nature.
But it's a reduced local share is what I'm hearing, and that you've got funding sources within the airport operations that aren't going to roll this over onto the property tax levy.
Correct. And what might have to happen as we've done in the past, so the PFC portion, may come from the county initially, but is being reimbursed. And I hopefully have we've been working with Kevin and Drew on the whole PFCs overall of where we stand. And it's actually better, I think, than what we had initially anticipated. So I wanted to get that report, hopefully January, to the FNI on that, on the PFCs. But
I wanted to point out, we aren't taking any action on this today. We do have some other things to take action on, but I've got Randy and Greg both had their hands up.
yeah, this is just really to accept the grant and that, can roll over. It doesn't have to be used right away, but we just, we want to accept the funds. We think, the more we can work this, I think the better off it'll be.
My first question is, so is this required by the FAA?
Yeah, so when it came up in a 2000, and I could be off by a year, 2018 or 2019 FAA inspection. Being that they have a requirement of how many feet have to be between fire trucks and snow plows, and they actually wrote a recommendation that we do a study to see if it's feasible to build a new facility because of the size of the equipment. It's not that we go out and spec larger equipment, it's over years of standards. Equipment keep getting bigger, right? Like, it doesn't matter, snow plows, fire trucks, they keep requiring certain things and they have to do certain things. Well, it makes them longer and higher and wider and all that stuff. So the feasibility study was funded, I believe, in 2018. The FAA funded that, and then we had to do the study, and they said, well, this is a size building that you should be looking at replacing this building with. So that's where we're at.
My next question is on the resolution for accepting a grant. I can wait till that.
Why don't we get it on the table since you've brought it up?
So I move that we put resolution.
Seconded by Greg. But go ahead.
Resolution number doc ID 12077.
Authorizing the acceptance of the DOT grant. Yep, it's on. So, Greg, are you finished, Randy, or not?
I had a question specifically on this. So this grant here is for this project, assuming it happens.
Right.
Correct.
So you don't get the money until actually the project, it just designates the money for you?
That's right.
Yep.
Okay, all right, that was my question.
Yep.
Greg?
Just, what do we have set aside in the capital plan for this? Do we have a dollar amount or just a
Presently,
placeholder?
no. We don't have any funding set aside for this.
But not like marked in future years? I know not in this current year.
Oh, yeah, it was,
Yeah.
it's a big number.
But it's all changed. It's
Yeah,
all,
okay, so we've at least at some point thought about a much larger number that's now a
Absolutely.
very small number in the capital plan.
We just saved a lot of money.
This is great. Let's move on and vote.
We're trying.
I can pull it and let you know what it is, but.
It's not,
It was initially, it was like a total project, we were up at like 30 million. And also, and again, this may also be reduced more for the site preparation, because that's a separate thing. So, but it's all within. So we went from like 29 down to 22, down to, could be lower. It's just, we're working it.
Almost 30 million.
Yeah, it was
what it
like
was.
29 something.
With less eligibility too. So our eligibility is starting to come up as we're shrinking things down, so the FAA is paying for more of the square footage.
well, great job.
Anything else? This is all good news. We appreciate it. Ready to vote on the resolution? Those in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimous. We have resolution terminal paid parking contract extension. Roxanne?
Yep. So we did an RFP for our terminal parking because the contract's due to expire January 8th. We got 3 proposals back. I'd reported this on the last one. After really looking into them, I wasn't comfortable signing a contract at that time because of the costs that were going to be associated. I think we can do better. I think we can make it a better revenue generator for the airport. Just started our strategic plan, so I'll kind of report that part here as well. We had our first initial meeting with the crew that's going to be doing the strategic plan. Wonderful group, really looking forward to that. I've sent them all the documentation on our current parking contract, our current RFP, where we're at. They have years of experience too in looking at non-airline revenue. I think we can do better. I didn't want to move forward with a 3-year to 5-year contract until we really looked at it. So I'd like to extend our current contract, initially 6 months, but up to a year, depending on how quick we can work through this with a strategic planning company and just, and hopefully we can get it back to better revenue generating for the airport.
Deb?
So help me understand how this contract works. We don't pay them, they take a cut, is that?
So it's a management contract is how it works. So whatever revenue we take in, whatever the expenses are, and then they get $1,000. So as of course the pandemic, we haven't had the parking revenue generated, so we've been having to pay them on some months. I'm struggling with that because I think there's other options. I think there's other ways we can do this better. I racked my brain. I read through the proposals. I read through the contracts. I've read other contracts. I want to do better with that.
What actually do they provide? Because a lot of times when we're over there and we leave short-term parking, there's nobody in the booth.
And there's supposed to be somebody there 24 hours. That's something else I worked into the RFP of how do we get away from that? How can we do that? The plowing, that's another bone of contention that they have a truck, they're supposed to take care of the lot, but then they couldn't find an employee to be able to do that. So
Then they don't get paid.
So then it's been a struggle. So I said we need to do something better. We need to change the contract. We need to change how we're doing this portion of the airport. So I figured the strategic plan, great opportunity to really sit and go through how can we bring this back.
And this is the best deal we could get?
This was like the only person that bid on the last time. And then the three for this time, they're all very similar how they're written. And I want to look outside the box. I want to do something different.
What if we just did it ourselves?
That's
The box, we're looking at time.
that's
Another
Yeah,
box.
okay. I have a spreadsheet called Josh's theory that we did this at a conference we were at for hours. We were in our hotel rooms emailing back and forth. There's a whole theory that we've shared with Norma and Lisa that they're going to really delve into with a strategic plan that it's outside the box, but I think it's a good way to think.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Are we ready to vote? Those in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimous. Now we go to a resolution authorizing a lease extension with the Department of Transportation, Federal Aviation Administration through September 30th, 2042 for air traffic control tower. Greg's moved it, seconded by Lee.
Standard contract with them. They don't pay us anything. They lease the building. We don't own it's the FAA tower. It's been
Budget neutral?
Yeah. It's you know.
Is the condition of that tower good as far as, do we have a lot of maintenance on it, or? They do that?
Yep.
Oh, that's good news. Okay. Ready to vote? Those in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimous. Then we have the one we added, airline contracts, Ithaca Tompkins International Airport.
First, I want to thank everybody for adding this today. So we have not had an airline agreement. I couldn't tell you the last one. Very many years. So we started this before the pandemic, began working on it, then it slacked off. Then people in the airline industry change. So if somebody new comes in, they relook at everything. So that was one of my goals for this year, was to get this done, to finalize agreements with our current airline partners, but these will also be used for new airline service when we get it. So worked with Recondo, our financial consultants. Kudos to Holly at the county attorney's office. She's been great getting stuff back to me. Jesse, when I got the email, literally right after the agenda was due for this meeting, that said the airlines are ready to sign, because they've went through like 6 levels of the airlines. They said they're ready to sign the agreement. I was like, oh my gosh, we could actually do this in 2023. So I put this on. It's a 3-year agreement, option to renew for 2 additional years. There'll be one with Delta, one with United, and then as new airline partners come on, we'll sign an agreement with them. It just lays out how things are calculated for rates and charges. It doesn't give definitive rates and charges because they change each year based on our budget. It's what space they can occupy, what their requirements are as far as security, what their insurance requirements are, what their responsibilities are, what our responsibilities are. It's very, probably 50 pages of great information. But that's where we're at. I was just hoping to get this done, and it could happen.
Okay, I think Lee was first, then Greg.
Just a question, so really it's logistical, it doesn't guarantee us how many flights they're going to bring in, I take it?
No, you can't. That's something that you can't put in to that document. But it allows, it gives information in there on negotiating and how you do that.
Thank you.
Greg?
I was just going to ask if you'd like this moved.
I thought we moved, maybe we didn't move it?
No,
Yeah,
there was no
we would
mover.
I would like it moved,
All right,
please. Thank you.
I'd be happy to move the resolution ID 12133. That's not in the agenda.
Seconded by Lee. Thanks for getting that on the table. Randy?
So is there any financial impact, revenue-wise, for this contract?
There isn't. It just, puts the cancellation clause in. It's no revenue. It's not, what they're going to pay us or what
It's a template.
Yeah, it just.
Everything but the money and the number of flights,
I got you.
basically.
Yeah,
I had to ask.
absolutely.
Ready to vote? Those in favor? That's unanimous. We're looking for Jeff. He was on, apparently not, and I know Jordan's trying to see if he's here. Let's just move on over him for a little bit. Maybe he'll show up. Transportation, I don't have any report except ITCTC will be meeting next week. Katrina, we're going to put that over about the clerk of the legislature office update until next meeting. Let's do the advisory board appointments. Have to the to the Hillview Road Landfill Citizen Advisory Committee, Brian Caldwell at large, and to the Air Services Board, Melissa Marchese, Ithaca College representative. Does anyone need a executive session to talk about either of those? You want to move them together? Okay, someone move them? Greg moved them, seconded by Deb. Those in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimous. Let's do the minutes. Greg's moved them. Deborah's seconded them. Any corrections or additions? Those in favor? That's unanimous. All right, I guess we just, I see Fernando there. Fernando, is there anything you'd like to talk to us about this morning?
Thanks for the opportunity. I just want to let you all know that the long-range plan, the 20-year transportation plan that my agency is required to put together every 5 years, we're on the 5th year, so we're updating it, and you'll be hearing about that effort, and as we seek outreach and from the public and from stakeholders.
So there'll be some public meetings on that?
There will be. We have a website page we put together. We put out a press release, so we're just getting the word out, and we'll begin the process of updating the document. We're doing a lot of work in-house. There's a lot of federally required data that needs to be updated and such, and we're fully engaged with that already in-house. So thank you.
Thank you. I got a couple of questions, I think.
Sure.
One from Deb?
No,
No?
it was something else.
One from Greg?
Something different.
Something different, okay. Thank you, Fernando. We appreciate your being with us this morning.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Deb.
Yeah, I just thought maybe we could move forward on the highway resolutions, except for
Yeah, I was just gonna
except for the
suggest- that's a
one
good
that
suggestion.
involved such a huge increase in cost.
I have, can I
Go ahead, Lori.
I did reach out to Jeff after the BCP meeting. He did give me a blurb to read to you regarding that increase. So if you want
good to
to
hear.
proceed, I can handle it as best I can.
Super, but let me just get to Greg.
I was just saying, just reading through the resolutions, it make sense to move forward. Some of them
Oh, yeah.
are relatively procedural.
We're
some
going to
are-
have to.
Yeah.
So why don't we take Resolution A? Bond resolution authorizing the issuance of up to $1 million of serial bonds and notes to the County of Tompkins to pay the cost to acquire certain machinery and apparatus for construction and maintenance. Is that the one you want to read about, or you want to?
That wasn't the one I was referring to, but I
Okay,
do
we
have
can
additional
wait.
information on that one as well if you have questions.
Deb reminded me at our budget meeting that we're going to have 10 votes to pass this at the legislature.
You were expecting this, Lori?
In the
Yes,
Oh.
these were all in the,
Deb-
these were all in the
Deb-
budget.
Deb has moved it. Who seconds it? Seconded by Greg.
They're all in the budget, you said. Nothing changed.
The only thing that's missing is my Tesla. I do not see it in there.
Mike, don't we get a similar resolution for about this value every year as part of the capital replacement plan for the highway department? Is that correct?
Sometimes, I think. I don't think it's always every year.
It's not always the same, but it is, yeah, it has been, at least I haven't been here for very long, but
You
the
and me
time
both.
I've been here, yes, it's been coming. Yes.
We saw these at budget the other day.
Randy?
Yeah.
So this would be where we would go out and issue a serial bond. So we're going to borrow money? Is that what this is for? Is it typically how we do that when we buy equipment? Okay, I think we should just pay cash for it myself.
Changed that a number of years ago. We used to not bond them, but been quite a while we've been bonding them.
The serial bond extends for the useful life of the equipment as determined by the determining authority.
Yes.
All right, so each useful life is different, right? So or is it all about the same?
Yeah, I don't have the exact useful life on it, but I believe that construction equipment is all in the same range versus a building. If a building wasn't lumped in with that for some reason, then it would be different, but
And can these be paid off sooner, or do you have to run the course of the life of the bond?
it will depend on what type of bond they sell. Some of them are callable and some are not.
Okay.
So,
Let's let Lori read Jeff's statement.
It's Jeff's statement relates to
the
the,
next one. He did give me the information on this one,
Okay.
on the particular
right.
equipment that was anticipated, but that's all I have on this one.
Great, and that's good. Thank you. So we want to vote on this one? All those in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimous.
No,
Nope,
I'm
nope,
against it.
there's opposed.
Sorry?
I'm against. I'm voting against it.
Yes, I think we all voted yes.
No, I voted against this, though.
Oh, you're voting against?
I vote no.
Okay. So that is 4-1. Did you want to say why you're voting against it?
I think we have plenty of money in our reserves, we should use that money.
All right, thank you. All right, let's go to Resolution B.
Sorry, Mike, can I ask a follow-up?
Certainly.
I apologize. Is there a way, just hearing Randy's concern, to understand the true, like the cost of capital, or what that would, like what that looks
I can
like?
get you that. I don't have that with me
Yeah,
today.
yeah, no,
I
of
can
course not
absolutely
today,
get you
yes,
that.
obviously. But maybe for the legislature meeting, to understand, if you're to pay cash today, or sort of look at those two, because I think that's at least for one of these type of resolutions, a worthy endeavor, just to go through the exercise, if it's not too much burden on your staff.
Real quick.
Norma?
Just to follow up, that's fine, however you all decide you want to do this, but it was not part of the budget plan. The budget plan was to pay for this way. So however if you all decide to make a different plan, that's fine, but it does not match what we adopted in our budget. So it would be a change.
Okay. Now can we move on? Lori, is it your turn now?
I guess so. So at BCP, the question came up on why this one had to be amended due to increased costs quite significantly. And per Jeff, he said there are two main reasons for the increase in costs for construction. The first relating to the original Bridge New York bridge application was done, which was in 2016. Since then, present construction bid costs have risen considerably. The second reason falls in the foundation design, whereby the original estimate, it was assumed the normal-driven construction piles could be used, whereas the closer survey and preliminary design, it is now felt that the drilled micro piles will need to be used because of the buildings in close proximity.
Okay. I would think that the legislature would like to hear that when it comes to the full legislature. So maybe we can add that as a note or something, or have it in the red folders.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, let's get this on the table. Resolution amended and restated bond resolution of the County of Tompkins adopted December 19th, 2023, amending a bond resolution adopted October 15th, 2019, to increase the maximum estimated cost of the project and to amend the plan of finance to authorize the issuance of additional serial bonds or notes to pay the costs thereof. Deb has moved it. Is there a second? Seconded by Randy. Further discussion. Lee.
Back to, any idea what local share may look like on this, or is it pretty much all coming through the Bridge New York funding? We'll bond it and they'll be paying for it. Is that how I read this?
The Cortlandt Street Bridge, and according to the budget, it looks like it's all bonding.
We're paying 100% share on it. So then,
Oh, we got some.
We're paying,
the
we pay
locals-
it up front, and then we get reimbursed for it.
right.
These bonds or bands or rands?
What were we answering that?
This particular one will be a bond. Jeff doesn't need it until January of 2025, so the recommendation is to put this forth in now so that the resolution's ready to go. So in 2025, we will bond for this money. We are not bonding for this in 2024. If he has any expenses that he needs to pay in January, we will upfront that and then refund ourselves back when the bond comes through in 25.
It's Groton, by the way.
Yeah, I know, and I'm not surprised with the change in the construction style. I know the bridge quite well, and it hit a lot of,
I misspoke. That is, this one is 100% county.
it is 100%.
That is 100% county.
So,
Apologize. that I
okay, so
misspoke.
it's going to reflect in a change somewhere down the road, budget-wise, when we build in 2025 and pay it off through the bonds.
We budgeted for the amount that's being requested
24.
in '24. We did not. This is not new to us.
I know the project's not new, the number is.
What you're saying is we passed the
You passed the budget
2.395.
23, yes.
It's in the capital.
This is in
It's
the capital plan at the higher rate.
You passed that.
This is
Yes.
just a formality behind it.
This is not changing it at all.
Okay, so we,
Look at that
Just
investment in
say
Groton.
thank you.
thank you.
The only thing that's changing is the resolution for the bonding, because the original bond, whenever it started, was at a lower amount for total project cost.
Thank you for the clarification.
And I did know you knew it was Groton. I was only kidding. Randy.
Yeah, when this comes to the full legislature, it'd be nice to know just the difference in numbers.
It's in the resolution.
I didn't see that. Maybe I missed it.
Line 25, line 26, line 35 and 36.
I'm on the wrong page, that's why.
Packet page 21.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we ready to vote on this one? I would just simply say that this is a project that seems to, it's been delayed and delayed, so anything we can do to move it forward, I'm really happy to see. Those in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimous.
We had a discussion at the town board meeting about this the other night, and the village was aware of it. The town wasn't fully aware, but both the village garage and the highway garage are just within feet away, and all of that equipment travels across it. And you've got a major local business that's right there, and then another one that we're going to have.
Did they offer any funding?
No, but it's a tremendous length there, and it was impacted by the floods in '81, and it's a tough spot, so.
That's why we need the stronger supports for the bridge. Yeah.
Very understandable.
Good to have that insight. Thank you, Lee.
All right, let's go to Resolution C here. Amended and restated bond resolution of the County of Tompkins adopted December 19th, 2023, amending a bond resolution dated October 18th, 22, to increase the maximum estimated cost of the project of reconstructing the Podunk Road Bridge located within the county. Someone want to move that one? Greg? Deb? Now, that one is not in Groton.
And it's much cheaper, right, Dennis?
Is this the same procedurally as the last one, or is this different?
No, we won't be bonding for the price difference because the price difference is smaller, as I understand it. It's only about a $200,000 price difference. We're just amending the resolution to reflect a higher cost of the bridge or culvert or whatever.
Plan is to spend fund balance on this one.
Right.
Yeah, and this one is federally funded, so we'll be bonding and then being reimbursed.
Under the original. Yeah.
Anything else on this one? Ready to vote? Those in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimous. Let's go to D, bond resolution authorizing the issuance of up to 1.178 million serial bonds and notes of the County of Tompkins to pay a portion of the cost of replacement and reconstructing of the Midline Road Bridge culvert. Midline, that's in Dryden.
I was going to say, whose district is that in?
I think it's mine. I divide right there. Divide right there somewhere. One of our, it's either Greg's or mine.
Second.
Randy, you and I need bridges.
Did you know that a third of our bridges are in the town of Dryden?
The natural, beautiful landscape that we enjoy so much out there, Mike.
It's soggy.
But our bridge in Lansing is much bigger than yours. The state paid for it.
Thank heavens.
And they include historic Groton bridges among those inventory, Mike.
You know anybody that wants one?
Yes.
Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Let's see, where are we?
We're down to 2023 goals.
Oh, yeah, I asked for that to be put on here just to kind of review what we talked about early in the year and whether we had done any of them. General facilities and building maintenance, we talked about discussing facilities in more depth, specifically regarding buildings and what needs or maintenance items have been deferred, and the focus on the geothermal and green facilities initiatives. Well, I think we've been doing all of that this year, and particularly our long discussion this afternoon, or this morning rather, was about the green facilities. So I think we've been making some progress there. Public safety building, discussion regarding the public safety building, gain a better idea of the costs potentially associated with the public safety building before moving forward on the center of government building. Well, I can't say that the legislature wanted us to do that because we have talked about it in this committee, but I think we talked about, in order to really understand the costs, we're going to have to get some engineering work done, and we don't have any money in the budget to do that at this point. And so hopefully that will be continued to be talked about with the committee next year. But I think that's unfortunately where we are.
Didn't we end up, though, Mike, at a point where REL had was going to move forward with projecting some costs in the months ahead that wouldn't require us to put a financial outlay toward design expenses? I mean, didn't we get to that point that we were?
I'm not sure whether he was actually going to do that or not. We can ask him. Randy.
Did make some progress on this. You had the jail working group that looked at a lot of the needed designs. I think some progress was made. Didn't cost us anything to do that, but we got recommendations, I think, report for that, which was very helpful for me. So I think some progress was made.
Downtown facilities, move forward on the downtown facilities discussion. I think we've been doing that. Move forward with discussion of the location of the center of government. I think we've focused in on that. Create plans, proposals, and ideas how to move forward with the center of government, including size, shape, and developmental path. And I think that administration's going ahead with the RFQ process, so I think that's happening. And the 400 block, investigate the idea of selling the Red House. Well, I think that's happened, and we decide on the Red House and the Baker Building lot and its future use. I don't know if we've decided about that, other than the sale of the Red House, but I think we've been doing our job there.
Yes, you reported that the train left the station earlier.
Can't put the horse back in the barn.
I think I missed it.
Toothpaste out of the tube. Yeah, we can go on like this forever.
Bridges and highways, receive an update on the bridges and highways to address needs.
Norma had a comment.
I'm sorry.
Only about I was just going to follow up on the Red House, not to belabor that point, but I did check in with a realtor. I'm going to verify this, but we do believe that, to your concern, it's only if they want to use those credits. They don't have to use those credits. So nothing will prohibit, there's not going to be a requirement that somebody uses the historic district credits. It's just going to be available to them to use it. So you don't have to do it. They only care about the outside of the building for the local historic. Inside doesn't matter, and that's all this is about. Is if they do renovate to the historic preservation of that home, that's when they can use those credits. If they don't do that, they just can't use the credits. So it's an availability. It's not a requirement. That's the way we understand it.
But
I'll get something in writing for that. But I don't want to take away from the goals, but I just want to follow up on that concern that you had. It doesn't stop anybody from buying the house and renovating it the way they want to. It just provides a 40% tax credit if they do.
But I think Lee's concern was if somebody was banking on that 40% credit and made an offer contingent on that.
Oh, yeah, a good stall. That's a choice that we'd have to make.
But then I don't think we'd accept an offer on that basis, so.
That's a choice we'd have to make from there. But so that's all. I just wanted to address that.
Thank you.
Yep. I'll stop talking.
All right, bridges and highways, receive an update on bridges and highways to address needs. Well, we have our normal capital projects report, and I think we got the spaghetti map about the projects for the highways. I would like to see a little more in-depth report about the condition of the roads and whether we need to do something to add lanes anywhere or address intersections or those kinds of things. We do get emails from time to time about different intersections that people are troubled by, and that might be something we want to continue over until next year. Other. Status update on the Newfield Covered Bridge and the relationship with the Newfield community. I think Randy talked to us about that, told us that we don't have keepers of the bridge anymore over there, but that the town is taking responsibility for a lot of the things, and there's going to be a celebration, right?
Yeah, they're going to wait till the spring now. They have made it much more accessible for people, especially handicapped people, to get through there, and have improved it quite a bit. Part of that was with a grant from the hotel tax money that we get. And they've got a few more repairs, and but I think they're planning in April or May of having some type of celebration. So.
Okay, thank you. Learn the financial impact of limiting greenhouse gases and converting to electric. Learn what the forecast of expenses involved with converting to electric will be. And the next one kind of goes with it, to understand more of the overall costs and fiscal impacts before moving forward on building projects.
I mean, we had that whole presentation on district geothermal, and.
Yep. But.
A rate case conversation in this committee or peak?
No, that's either peak or HED. I can't remember which one. Yeah.
Given the resolution we passed earlier and the addition to it, it kind of guarantees it as we move forward on projects. We're going to hear about the overall costs and fiscal impacts of implementing these
I was trying to remember
processes and procedures.
I was also trying to remember whether Mega reports to us. Can't remember whether it's to planning. But that might be something we might want to get a update from them at some point.
That's already pretty much baked in, though, isn't it?
Pardon?
The money we save on Mega, that's already pretty much baked in. I mean.
Yeah, but they change what they do from time to time, and I think they've been trying to get back to focusing more on natural gas than they were.
Oh, interesting.
They when it started out, it was to be both, natural gas purchasing and electric purchasing. Spend funds for a true cost estimate to find if building ideas are viable. Don't remember what that one was about.
I think we talked about that today.
Yeah, I think some of that too was around the center of government or other building projects, sort of understanding the more detailed costs before we get into decision-making. And I think we've definitely done that, either between here or the downtown facilities.
But we're also
committee.
finding that it's hard to understand those costs until we spend some money to get an architect or an engineer to give those costs to us.
I think there's a lot of overlap.
Certainly we've been hearing a lot of that out of the airport projects.
Ready?
Balance between updates and tangible action.
Still looking.
I think that's good. Find the cost of completing all the committee's goals before approving anything.
No.
Some goals are lofty.
Good luck.
And learn what needs to be borrowed, learn the negatives of paying a higher rate when borrowing. I think Randy's been keeping our feet to the fire on that one.
I think that, Laura, you sent an email to Dan Klein about the cost of borrowing and based on our various ratings. I thought it was very interesting, so, yep.
Like, I think we checked a lot of these boxes off. I think it was a productive year, especially with the pace in which government can move at times. I think we've done really well. Appreciate your leadership.
Well, thanks for that. But it's the whole committee. And we've had a lot of spirited discussions, and we haven't agreed about everything, and that's all right. That's the process.
Agreed about everything. We wouldn't need 14 of us. We just need one.
Just me.
There you go.
Just you.
Well, the idea,
better.
the idea I was always told was to hammer it out in committee.
That's where the work gets done. And you know, it's interesting because someone was saying on the green initiative that we were talking about, if we need to do a better job getting out these kinds of issues to the public. We really have lost a lot with the change in the way our public information works. It used to be we would have a report after every committee meeting that went to the media. And we don't have that anymore. And I'm certain that if we asked for something particular to be worked on, that Dominic and his department would work on that. But it used to be a matter of course. And I know we don't have as much staff to do all of that, but that was a sea change when we went from reporting on the committees for the legislature to back when Marsha Lynch was our public officer, to the change that was recommended by county administration when Dominic was hired. But I think we ought to still be thinking about how we can get what the committees do out to the public. Deb?
I think there are two sides to that equation. It's not just our decision about how to proceed. It's also the fact that, let's face it, our local media sucks, and they're not interested. If we deal in a committee with an issue of some interest to the local community and the local media, they find a way to cover it. But I just don't see a lot of interest. I don't see a lot of interest just in our legislative meetings either. So I think there's two sides to this problem. It's
I
not
understand what you're saying, but they used to take our reports and publish them, even though they were written by us, and they would put staff report or something on it.
You know, I know that the Ithaca Times and Ithaca Voice tries hard to cover everything, but Ithaca Times particularly seems very Ithaca-centric. They cover the Common Council pretty closely, but they most of the time don't pay much attention to us at all.
Well, Tompkins Weekly and the Tompkins Independent, which is part of the Ithaca Times group, tries to do some of that stuff.
Tompkins Independent? I never even heard of that.
It's the consolidation of what used to be the Dryden Courier and the Groton.
They publish a small handful of municipality-specific, centric, I'll say centric news, right? Yeah, I think they've got like 3 or 4.
I think there's
I've never
labels
seen
that they
I think
put
the
for.
Independent's on our side, and there's another one on the west side, right? Randy, you had your hand up?
Yeah, some people at Newfield are trying to figure out how to connect with more people, so they actually formed a group. And they've done a really good job and came up with a plan last month. And I think there's like 14 different ways that they're going to communicate, information. When they finish that final report, I'll make sure you get a copy, but they identified a lot of areas. I mean, from Facebook to the schools to other media. So it was really interesting
Yeah,
how.
but it's like social media has pretty much taken over, and with the Ithaca Journal's corporatization with USA Today, I think in the past, Ithaca Journal had been the main media that covered the legislature. And that coverage is just missing now. And I probably shouldn't be so harsh because I know that Ithaca Times and Tompkins Weekly and Ithaca Voice and 14850, I mean, they're all trying to fill a gap that used to be filled by a real newspaper organization with a lot more resources than any of our little local media have anymore. But yeah,
They're never going to cover us the way the Journal used to years ago.
I know. It's
But
just.
so if we can provide them reasonable updates, I think a lot of them would use them.
I know they did a survey too to understand where people were getting most of their media from. It was interesting. I'll provide that information. I know Tompkins Weekly was like 3 or 4, and radio was a lot higher than people thought.
Yeah, WHCU seems to be covering us a lot more than any of the print or online newspapers.
Cortland Standard publishes a lot of Dominic's press releases.
Because it's a real local newspaper.
Yep. Well, anyway, I just thought I'd talk about that a little bit because it's important, and it's sad that we don't have that. I just don't think people get the balance by not having the third estate covering.
Well, it's hard to have a truly functioning democracy if you don't have an informed electorate, and you can't have an informed electorate without media.
Me, it's just plain accountability that's lacking. You know, I go back 40 years here with the organization, and sure we'd have ever built a 911 center or a radio communications, and they kept pointing out to the county that you're behind. You need to invest in public safety. And I'll forever laud the Ithaca Journal for holding the legislature or the Board of Representatives accountable at the time. And I've seen it on lots of other issues, and that just has gone away. And people were scared to death of an article being written that cast the organization in a bad light. And so I miss that accountability because I think sometimes we do need to have our feet held to the fire.
Remember the front page about this $110,000 desk?
Remember when they printed the assessments on everybody's house for the legislature?
I think it's, I want to just caution us as we look at what was and we understand what is and the evolution. And I think the focus should be on how we engage with what the current is rather than what the past was and how it's not there, because things change, right? The way the legislature does work today is different than the way the legislature did work 20 years ago too, right? So everything is going to evolve. News has evolved. You want to get your feet held to the fire, post something controversial on Facebook and see how many comments you get, right? Like there's your editorial, right? The people are no longer having to submit to news organizations because they can put their editorial out into the public sphere for all to be seen and shared without having to submit to an editor that decides if they want to post it or not. And I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. I'm saying it's what it is to some regard. And we need to also leverage the news organizations that we do have and build those relationships, invite them in, invite that accountability, invite that. And I know they do their best, but I think it's really important to focus on where we are and how we engage today and how we continue to evolve and engage moving forward. Because the way that people uptake news is just different.
Except that social media is not news. What you miss without an editorial staff and professional reporters is fact-based reporting. What you get instead is everybody's got their own little version of reality. Many times those versions are not factually based.
I'm not saying we evolved to the right direction. I'm just saying we've evolved. And here's Dominic now to jump in.
I was gonna try to help Dominic out there a little bit too, because I know he's been working. He sends out media releases all the time, and very rarely do those media releases get published. And I know he's been working. So he's here. He can speak for himself, but he's been working to through our strategic plan. We've been talking about better communications, and I'll shut up and let Dominic speak for a second.
I'm sorry, I had stepped away from my desk for a minute. Can someone restate the main question just for me really briefly?
We were just, I had brought up the fact that what I think we're missing when we were talking about earlier in the meeting about trying to get more information out to the public, I mentioned that years ago we used to have every committee, there would be a report after each committee that went out to the press. And that changed the way we do things. But I do think that reporting for the committee is still pretty important. And not criticizing anybody or anything, but it's an area that if we want to get out what we just did about the green initiative here, it's kind of hard to happen.
Yeah. Well, I can, a couple quick thoughts that I think are might be of interest to the committee. One is that I think Norma was just talking about the sort of problem we're having with press releases. There is, they're frankly not getting picked up for story ideas or for follow through quite as much as I would like, or as has been common practice in the past, which is unfortunate. So I worry that if we were to do releases after committee meetings, the press may not actually report on it. But we have our newsletter system, so we could probably think about doing more directly from the county to the information consumer. And I certainly welcome more resources and staff time on our team as time goes on, and as we can make those arguments to the legislature to increase that. But I will also say, and this I haven't updated because the Public Information Advisory Board has just sort of decided to move forward with this. So you'll all be hearing more about this, but we are planning an event for the spring, likely in March, where we're going to be inviting all elected officials in Tompkins County, including all of the legislators, and then all of the members of the media or reporters who have Tompkins County as part of their coverage, to a networking event and to have a panel from elected officials talking about what types of coverage they wish they saw more in local media, and from local media, a panel sort of sharing what they hope to see more in that relationship development. So I hope that things like that we can do on a sort of ecosystem scale can help increase that information reporting on what things like committees are doing.
That sounds very intriguing.
Thanks for letting me share.
Well, thank you for chiming in. I think we ought to close the meeting. And if anybody wants to continue discussion about this afterwards, it's all right. But thanks you to everybody. I think we got one more meeting in January, maybe. I don't know how it's going to, when the committees will be structured. But and anyway, I hope everyone has wonderful holidays. And it's been a pleasure working with everybody here. We're adjourned. Thank you, Jordan.